Hello again, everyone. I'd like to just talk a little bit about a question I've had about guiding and what essentially makes the perfect guide. What qualities does a good or great guide need to have? And let me first start by saying that, as with any profession, there is no perfect guide because it's a very subjective thing. First of all, people look for different things, and what I would consider to be a perfect guide would be very different to what somebody else might consider to be a perfect guide. For example, somebody might look to have a guide that really knows everything about birds and can answer the question about every bird call, and others might have no interest in birds whatsoever, and they would find a bird guide particularly boring and ask for a guide change. So that's a very subjective thing. But secondly, as I said to start off with, ultimately in the pursuit of perfection, I think that's a lifetime, and no one ever really achieves it because, you've got to tick so many boxes. You're constantly striving to know more, experience more, and it's all about experience at the end of the day. Dealing with very dynamic environments, with wildlife, with people, you're always going to get that unusual guest scenario, somebody you've never had, a question you've never been asked, a scenario where somebody suddenly stands up and jumps off a car and you have to deal with the situation. Those are all things that you cannot really plan for. You can do as much training as you like, but all of that comes with experience. So in terms of the perfect guide, everybody's trying to get there. But let me just touch on some of the other things now. There's often competitions out there that are very much like what's the best lodge. People are going for who's the best guide in a particular area, country or region. And again, that's all very subjective. Who are the judges? What are they looking at? And you'll find very often what guide trainers, guide assessors are looking at is very different to what the average guest on a safari might look for in terms of a guide. So I, as an assessor, might go and say, you're the guide of the year, you're the best guide out there. You tick all the boxes as far as I'm concerned, but I send you out on a game drive, and the first guest you go out with calls you an absolute idiot because it's like getting blood from a stone. Didn't like the personality, didn't like what we saw, and give me a different guide. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not really worth the paper it's written on. And purely because it's a very subjective industry, and it's a hospitality industry, and at the end of the day, guiding is a people industry. And what a lot of people fail to recognize here is that trying to become a great guide has got less to do with what you know than what your personality is. It's about 80% of our jobs as guides is to do with people, handling people, rather than having to interpret what we see in the natural environment. So I always like to do an 80-20 split and say 20% information, 80% people. If you can know everything under the sun about an animal or about the environment, but if you cannot articulate that information and get that across to a whole range of audiences, from young children through to elderly people, intellectuals, people who are hearing impaired, people from different language groups, then you've actually failed in your pursuit of being a guide. So it's really not quantifiable to be able to say who's the best and who isn't. What is far easier to do, however, is when going for selections of guides, it really needs to be a selection process, and we need to first and foremost look at the qualities of the personality. You need to deal with people, like I said, most of the time. So you need to be extroverted. You need to be, you can't be somebody who's timid and retiring. You've got to be able to get out there, do what you have to do, break the ice, speak to people, get people to mix. You also have to have a very good sense of humor. That stands for most aspects of life. If you don't have a good sense of humor, first of all, in an environment where people are actually coming on holiday, vacation, they're coming to have a good time. If you're a person who's very, very serious, you're not going to go very far in this industry. You want to be able to entertain, have people laughing, smiling. And having fun is what makes things memorable, what makes people come back, what ensures that any little hiccups along the way are actually smoothed out very, very quickly. So a good sense of humor is, as far as I'm concerned, imperative for being a good guide. I think you need to be very compassionate. Obviously, you're dealing with lots of different people, different fear factors, different needs, different expectations, and you need to be able to deal with all of that. You need to also be an entertainer. At the end of the day, going back to being more about people than what you know and all that type of information. It's a lot of the time the game is not delivering. You go out on game drives and you're not seeing a lot, or of the big stuff anyway, and You might have inclement weather or bad weather, rainy weather, whatever the case might be. You might be sitting in an airport if you're a private guide taking people around and there's flight delays. You essentially need to be able to entertain people. Now, I'm not saying get up on a table and tap dance and do cabaret and all that type of stuff unless you're very good at it. But just entertain, like I said, break the ice. You don't need to be a comedian either. Not everybody's a comic, and again, you need to be able to match whatever type of entertaining you're doing to the guests, because it's very different day to day. But essentially, somebody who can captivate. You need to have charisma. You need to have a very strong personality. You need to be engaging. You need to communicate very, very well. At the end of the day, you're dealing with people from different backgrounds, typically in most lodges, and you need to be able to communicate with people in a language they understand. You also need to be a host, and many guides actually forget this. They think the hosting is up to the camp managers or the company in general, but at the end of the day, the guests who are coming out on a safari are spending more time with the guide than with anybody else. So essentially, you're their primary host. And it's not to say the other people are unimportant, but you're essentially the go-between between the guests and management. You're there to pass on things. You're there to, like I said, help them at meals and entertain them there if they require that, and certainly out on the game drives. You've got sundowner stops, you've got coffee stops and so on. You don't just go and hide behind the bush. You're actually there to communicate with them. That's a time to talk to them about the country in general that they're visiting, talk about religious beliefs, the economics, the politics of the country, whatever it might be, in an educational manner. That's what you need to do. So you're educating and you're entertaining at the same time. The other thing is, while being that host, you're also an advisor. At the end of the day, people are going to turn to their primary host for advice. They're going to ask you questions about where they're going to, maybe other camps or places they've come from. They saw something, they weren't really sure what was going on, or what are they going to see at the next place. Or it might be something as simple as, how do I dress for tomorrow morning game drive? What is the temperatures likely to be? And a good guide would be one who can communicate in a language the guest understands. It doesn't help that you talk in centigrade when they talk in Fahrenheit. I mean, you're talking Chinese to the guy. It doesn't matter unless he's Chinese. But you need to be able to communicate in a language they understand and say it's going to be this particular temperature, there's a likelihood of rain, dress accordingly. Because if people are not prepared for something, they're not going to enjoy the experience. It's going to have a negative impact on them, ultimately mars the whole experience, and then the feedback you will get as a guide. So guiding is also about planning. As somebody who's very astute, conscientious, somebody who can plan their day-to-day activities. I hear a lot of guides, and I am a guide trainer, as I'm sure a lot of you know. A lot of guides say to me, I'm just going to go out there and wing it. What are you talking about? Tom Cruise, Top Gun? What is this? You're not going to go out there and wing it. You're going to go out there with a plan. You have to have a plan. Yes, is it a dynamic environment? Is the wildlife unexpected? Or you're not going to know what's around the next corner? For sure. But you need to have a plan of what you're wanting to do, where you're wanting to go, what you're planning to deliver on in the context of the guest's whole itinerary. And if things aren't working out in plan A, you have plan B. And that comes from everything from, the sightings you're going to potentially go to, how you're going to respond to things on the radio if you're operating in an area like that, or where you're going to have your drink stops, coffee stops, that type of thing. What you're planning for the afternoon, the next day. You've got people coming in and out at camps. You've got different interests. A good guide is one who can have flexibility. You need to have flexibility out here. You can't be working to a rigid time frame where you've got to be back at a specific time. Now, I know a lot of managers will tell you that, and it doesn't really work in this environment. People are on vacation. They spend most of the year, glued to time, sticking to the time, constantly. Time is money. Everybody's go, go, go. They finally come to a place where the only thing that is really scheduled is the departure time. Thereafter, come back. Why should I come back at 9 if I can come back at 9:15? If I see a leopard busy stalking something, why should I be told that I have to go back now for breakfast? I can have breakfast any day of the year. I don't give a monkey's what your breakfast is, what the chef's cooking for you. I want to watch this leopard stalking. I may never get this opportunity again. And a good guide is one that's not going to push that. They're going to be able to interpret their guests' expectations. They're going to be able to watch all the time. A good guide, like I said, attention to detail. You've got to be able to constantly be aware of your surroundings. Situational awareness is key. Monitor what's going on with the wildlife around you, interpret the animal behavior, preempt potentially dangerous situations, but at the same time also monitor your guests. A lot of guides stop in a sighting and all they do is watch the animal, and they're not actually paying attention to those behind them. And you have a total breakdown of communication there, and often it's a lack of trust that develops as well, because you need to maintain eye contact with these people. You need to be able to see fidgety movements on a vehicle, somebody who's perhaps becoming a little bit nervous, just watch their faces, and you can actually, again, preempt negative behaviors from some of the people. So I think, going back to the original question, there are no perfect guides. I've been guiding for many, many years. You'll go through your whole career trying to become the best possible guide. And even then, I might get somebody who thinks I'm a terrible guide. So, you can't win them all, and I don't think you need to try and win them all. As far as knowledge is concerned, certainly the best guides are the ones that have got a wide knowledge base. Nobody's ever going to become an expert in everything. But if you can actually know a little bit about a lot of things, it certainly creates the impression that you're very knowledgeable, answering most of the questions that people are likely to ask, and that's going to make you a successful guide at the end of the day. So a lot to consider there. At the end of the day, personality is key. There's a lot of people in this industry who are inappropriate guides. They're in it for the wrong reasons, and they shouldn't be in the industry. And I would much rather have a great personality on my vacation with my family, keeping me entertained, giving me a good time, still showing me the animals, than somebody who thinks he's Einstein, trying to give me, baffle me with intellectual mumbo jumbo, and who's got the charisma of a brick at the end of the day. So I hope that puts it in a nutshell for you. If you've got any further questions on that, then please certainly let me know. Have a great one further. Cheers.